Good day, everyone, and welcome to Power Talks with the Talk Doctor, featuring Ask the Talk Doctor Live. Thank you so much for gifting yourself this time and for being here today to join us with what I think is an exceptional show that we have planned here for you today. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. This is Power Talks with the Talk Doctor. I'm your host, Dr. Dacia P. Hastings. I'm a psychotherapist, speaker, wellness consultant, and life coach. And I am the creator of Stress Free Talk RX, which you can find on my website at www.thetalkdoctor.com. This is my video podcast, Ask the Talk Doctor Live, featuring Power Talks with the Talk Doctor. And we're here today to talk about what I think is a very important subject, the state of the Black family post-pandemic. So wherever you're joining us from, please go ahead and put your city that you're joining us from in the chat, say hello, whatever it is that you want to check in. And the chat is going to be open for the duration of this talk. So we encourage you to put your questions, your comments, and things of that nature so that we can get to them during the Ask the Talk Doctor Live portion of this segment. So without further delay, we're going to go ahead and jump right into things. I'm so glad you're here. Get comfortable, take a seat. I hope you brought a friend today. It's really important that you tell as many people as you possibly can about this podcast because we try our very best to make this show a place where you can come to decompress, be in the moment, allow yourself to experience other people's questions and comments, gain support things that might resonate for you. The show, as I said, is divided into two segments. We do a power talk in the beginning, and then the second half of the show, we tend to take your questions. And at times, viewers will send in questions that we choose and air here on the show. We keep your confidence, so it's anonymously aired, but the questions tend to resonate with other people. So remember to go to Ask the Talk Doctor Live at gmail.com and send us your questions. Your questions can be about just about anything that you may be experiencing, because we want to be helpful and we want to offer this platform as a place where people can gain life support. Well, we have a great show for you today. We're talking about the state of the Black family post-pandemic. So whether you live in an inner city or the suburbs, downtown, uptown, East Coast, West Coast, and if you've got ears pressed firmly to the ground, you've probably been impacted by this turbulent society that we live in today. Gun violence in schools, malls, places of worship, just about anywhere you live, work, or play. Carjackings, break-ins, scams of various kinds. Then there are, of course, the numerous deaths, whether from gun violence or illnesses, unfortunate societal and epic proportions, rising cost, inflation, shaking families at its core, especially those most vulnerable in our society, those most vulnerable that seems to be having housing insecurity or food insecurity. The most vulnerable tend to be our minority women and children. Now, I can go on about the state of the world. I don't think you need me to tell you what's happening, because all you have to do is turn on your evening news and witness on your TV in 4K all the things that I've been sharing with you that's going on and how it's impacting, unfortunately, the less fortunate. You know, we'll focus today discussion on one population in particular that has been in a state of demise for as long as I can remember. Unfortunately, however, it seems that even after emerging from slavery and other societal oppressive times in our history, the Black family unit is once again on a downward spiral. And it's hitting those families also in the middle, but impacting the world, regardless of your race, your color, your ethnicity, your religion, or your socioeconomic status. The state of the Black family today is a conversation that for some might bring about some sense of discomfort. So, what do? We often tend to shy away from having open discussions about it. Yet the truth is, we are in the midst of a societal crisis that has sadly been exacerbated by the pandemic and continues to impact our society in alarming ways. Today, joining us for the first time on this show is my guest, Judge Tara Fentress. But before I bring her on, just a little bit about my guest. She was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, earned her Juris Doctorate from Georgetown University Law, appointed to the DC Superior Court in 2002 as one of the first 9 family court judges when that system was established, where she presides over child abuse, neglect, custody, adoption, guardianship, termination of parental rights, and juvenile delinquency cases. Other roles that Judge Tara plays, she's a minister, she's a singer, she's a worship leader, she's a children's book editor. And one of the things I love is that Judge Fentress embraces the statement, to whom much is given, much is required. She wears one robe that fits 3 callings: judging, preaching, and singing. Her message is be encouraged. With God, all things are possible. Judge Fentress is indeed a woman of faith with a calling on her life, one whom I am proud to also call my friend. So, Power Talks with the Talk Doctor, please join me in welcoming our guest for today, Judge Tara Fentress. Welcome, Judge Fentress. Thank you so much for being here. How are you, dear?
Good afternoon.
How are
you?
I am well. I am well. I'm so glad you are here today. You know, I will tell our guests that you and I, were supposed to be in your chambers today, but no fault of your own, due to unforeseen circumstances on my part, I wasn't able to join you in chambers, but you are here and we are excited to have you today. So tell us what your role looks like as a family court judge at the District of Columbia Superior Court.
Well, as a judge in DC Superior Court assigned to the Family Court Child Abuse and Neglect Calendar, again, as you heard, I preside over cases involving children, child abuse and neglect cases, and because we are one family, one judge, I also sometimes preside over custody matters or child support matters or juvenile delinquency matters, as long as that matter impacts the child who's on my calendar. Mm-hmm. And so we tried best to assign the cases to the judge who knows the most about not just the child, but the entire family. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing this now for 20 years on the bench and then 10 plus years practicing, primarily representing children. Mm-hmm. Children in the District of Columbia's child welfare system. Some have been removed from their parents and others have remained in the home, and we're putting services in the home. And the ultimate goal is to provide permanency for the families, to address the issues within the family, whether it's therapy that's needed or counseling, housing assistance, employment assistance. Sometimes children have special needs that have not been addressed. They can be better addressed when there's a judge involved. So that's the work that I do, and that's my calling, and I love it.
Yeah, sounds fascinating. You know, listening to you takes me back to a time in my life, very, very early on in my career, when I worked as a family preservation social worker and also dealt with a lot of abuse and neglect situations and right here in the District of Columbia. I remember. So I don't think I've ever come before you, but that was a way before, a time ago, and just listening to your vast amount of experience. Who best to have this conversation with about the state of the Black family today, also post-pandemic, but you. It sounds like you do a lot as it relates to families and families who are probably in dire situations, unfortunately. So I want to know, in what ways has your cases changed following the pandemic? Will you say that you see now an increase in abuse and neglect cases? What has changed? In what ways do you see changes?
Well, a couple things have changed. One, once the pandemic occurred, we went virtual with all of our hearings, particularly the family court. We didn't miss a beat. We made sure that families had an opportunity to log on to hearings. The agency provided them, Child and Family Services Agency, and the courts with tablets that could be used. We had locations throughout the city where people could log on to the hearings, and we were just trying to keep everyone safe. And so one reason why I have this robe on is because I had a hearing this morning. I wasn't feeling well, and so I remained at home. And even though you see the home in the background, we have backgrounds where it appears that the judge is in the courtroom on the bench during the hearings. We've had much more participation in our court hearings during the pandemic because we have parents who are at work. They're able to log in, children who are at school. They're able to go to the counselor's office, log in, go into a closet, log in.
Yeah.
And so that's been extremely helpful. But in terms of the cases and the impact of the pandemic, what I've seen, as I said, on child abuse and neglect. And pre-pandemic, the majority of the cases were neglect cases. Cases where the parent had addiction issues, maybe forgot to pick the child up from school or daycare, or neglected the child's basic needs. Once the pandemic hit, the cases that came in became really, really serious cases of abuse, and often dealing with abuse of children, and maybe where another sibling had been murdered or as a result of abuse. So we had much more serious cases coming in. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that families had to stay home together.
Yeah.
They had to deal with their issues together.
Yeah.
And then also, we didn't have that third party component of someone to report the cases. Doctors, ministers at church, educators, principals, teachers, everyone who normally in society would see it as a problem and call the hotline and report it. And so without that reporting and everyone being indoors and dealing with day-to-day issues, a lot of people turned to drugs and alcohol to deal with the stressors of the pandemic. It became a fireball for a lot of children and families. And so that's the impact that I saw within the court system.
Sounds quite dire, and I echo what you're saying. The first part, where we found, a lot of limitations in terms of the pandemic, where it has hurt us. There's also things that have emerged from it, the convenience of people being able, to attend their hearings and not have to disrupt so much of their day. And it sounds like you've had an increase in participation, but at the same time, the cases seem so much more serious and profound than they have been. And you're absolutely right. Stress on the family unit, stress on the Black family unit is indeed a fireball, like you've indicated. It's very hard, in my realm of work, we see a lot of the impact of the stress on the family. Divorce, domestic violence, went up exponentially. And all of these things really does impact the family unit. It can no longer function as a unit when a lot of these, these unfortunate things occur within the family, causing a strain and a stress that sometimes people just don't know what to do with. So I want to talk about societal conditions. We're talking about the Black family unit, and certainly it doesn't mean that we're isolating other families, but you see a lot of Black families come before you. You see a lot of people dealing with poverty and other types of issues, which probably exacerbate their situations even more. Let's talk about some of those societal conditions that you think are affecting the Black family today.
Well, first of all, you mentioned divorce, and during the pandemic, unlike my regular pre-pandemic work on the bench, there was an abundance. There were an abundance of divorces filed, uncontested divorces, and so they had to spread those out among the child abuse and neglect judges, just so we could make sure we kept up with the number. We caught up earlier this year, and then they took that burden off of us. But again, the case filings, divorces, domestic violence has soared during the pandemic. That's a hybrid in our court system between family court and criminal court, primarily criminal court. We see the impact of it in the child abuse and neglect cases. And I'll just say this, for those adults who don't realize it, anytime there's domestic violence going on in a household and there are children present, whether they are harmed or not, the mere fact that they're able to hear what's going on or to see what's going on or to sense what's going on is traumatic. Trauma.
Yes.
And so seeing that throughout the pandemic and the impact on the children and families, that's been extensive. But I also think there have been some great things that have come out of the pandemic with the family.
Yeah.
I think that families have drawn closer together, that they're speaking to each other, that they're spending time together now, that neighbors are starting to know who their neighbors are, not just by name, but actually, interacting with them, using them as a backup. I've seen the negative sides of the impact on the family, but I've seen a lot of positives.
Yeah.
And just me and my own relationships with my parents, ever since the pandemic hit, and my mom had COVID right in the beginning. Now I speak to my parents several times a week. I used to speak to them every week or 10 days or so. You don't take life for granted.
Yes.
No one takes life for granted as a result of this pandemic. And so every day is precious. And I think people realize that on one front. On the other front, we have people who have no regard for human life.
Yes.
The carjackings, the thefts that involve violence. Every single day, we hear news stories about murders in the city. And it's not just our city, it's every major city. It's not even the major cities. It's,
It's even in the burbs.
Yes. And if we have more mass shootings, as a judge, we have a lot of training with the U.S. Marshal Service and Civil Service. And so, in terms of protection, and hearing the number of mass shootings this year alone, even this week alone, would be astonishing for me. Recent session where we heard about the number just in a month or in a week, and it's astonishing.
Yes.
And I think, again, this is all a matter of people reacting to stressors and trauma in their own lives that has not been addressed, and it trickles down to the children.
It does, indeed. I mean, you said a lot here, and I know that, this is a subject matter that we probably need more than one, part to really unpack, because it is so much here. And, I have a diverse viewer audience. And if people here today are wondering, why should I care? Why should I care about the Black family? I'm not Black. I'm of a different race or a different ethnicity. Why should this matter to me? Let's talk about why it matters, because you said something very important. You talked about the idea that all of these things that we're seeing is not just, localized or to the inner city. It's worldwide. It's as if, it has just kind of spread like a wildfire. And people may think that with focusing on one family unit, one type of family unit, but how does it impact all of us, regardless of what we look like, regardless of where we live, regardless of where we've been?
It impacts all of us because we're all connected. We're all human. We're all God's creation. Everyone has the same makeup. We have feelings, we have emotions, we have a physical body. And so whether or not I know someone or whomever, when I hear a news story about multiple people being killed, about children being killed, about areas being bombed, I don't have to know those people to feel their pain.
Right.
And so it's a sense of empathy,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of sympathy, a feeling of this is another human being, and how can I make this situation better? I need to do something. Is there anything I can do?
Absolutely.
And it should impact all of us.
Yes, absolutely. And you're absolutely right about the human connection, but it seems to me that unfortunately that has been so lost. I heard you talk about disregard for human life, disregard for anyone else. It almost seems like way back when, it was a village, regardless. And today, the village seems to be lost. That's one of the strengths or the cornerstones of the Black family unit, relying on the village. But I ask myself these days, where's the village? Does the village still exist? Do we have to recreate what the village looks like? Because it is the one thing that I think could get people back to a place where they used to be, the strength that they gain relying on other people looking out for each other, people being able to say, yes, am I my brother's keeper? I absolutely am. If I see something going on, I need to be able to report it to your mother, your grandmother, your aunt, your uncle. And I just don't let it go because it impacts all of us. Guess what? It's not just where Blacks live or Blacks families live, but it's extending everywhere. So if we don't do something about the crime that we see as a result of people's situations and stress, and maybe not just having the right tools or resources, it ultimately impacts all of us. But one of the things that I want to ask about is how does your faith play a role in your work as a judge? And how do you cope with your own stressors, balancing work and life?
Well, first of all, this job is a calling, and so I'm fulfilling my calling to work with children and families. That's my passion. People ask me, how can you do this type of work? And I say, well, I'm making a child's life better, one child at a time. I get to see the villages. I get to see the aunts, the uncles, the fathers, the grandparents that come there and are a support system for a child, or who adopt a child within a family, or who are guardians for the child until they become an adult. I see all the services in place to help the child. I see the social workers who are so dedicated to making sure the family's needs are met. And so I have that opportunity to see that. But the other thing is, I never want to make a decision about a child where I can't sleep at night. And it faces the premise is the best interest of the child. And so spiritually, I rely on my prayer life, my faith with God, my relationship with God. He speaks to me, he guides me, he directs me. And I always ask for the wisdom to be able to impact his people, because these are his people that I'm dealing with daily, and I take it very seriously. I also make sure that I do self-care. As you know, I get regular massages and have spa days, and just take time off, and mental health days, and travel, and just change the scenery sometimes. Just drive and look at the trees, and focus on other things. Your job can never be your whole life, and this for me is a job. But I do have to, maintain my own self-care to be able to be the best I can be in the courtroom and outside the courtroom.
Yes, absolutely. As I listen to you talk about, this being a calling and how much you care and how much you take the work that you do seriously, there's a common misconception out there about judges, and there are some people who still fear judges. They fear the robe, as they should probably have a healthy fear for it, because you make a decision for people's lives, i.e., many people of color that come before you. But when I listen to you, and talking about where you gain your guidance from, it's important to know that you are part of this dynamic of supporting and strengthening the Black family unit, because it sounds like you do ultimately want what's best. You do ultimately make your decision in the best interest of the child and ultimately the family unit. So that's really good stuff. I'm really glad to hear that. What advice can you share in helping Black families cope with their declining situations in society? Where do they go from here? As we talked about all of the things that's happening in society and the stressors that have increased, where do we go from here? What advice can you share?
Well, first of all, I think the spiritual connection is critical. Everyone doesn't have the same spiritual connection, but you need that because you, in and of yourself, you're just not enough to handle all of life situations. The other thing is to amass your own support system. You don't have friends that you trust. Make sure you get some friends you can trust. Family, connect with services in your community. Here in DC, we have so many services available for counseling, for families, for housing, every issue you can think of. We have collaboratives that are located in the neighborhoods. There's always help. And I would say set aside your pride and never be afraid to ask for help. It is a small word, but it has big results. And then also, with respect to your past, everyone has a past. And you need to get to a point where you can let it go and move forward. Not forgetting what happened in the past, but not letting it hold you back from moving forward. And that's the advice that I would leave for today.
Absolutely. Very well said. I agree with you so much with that. And with that, I'd like to take questions. If we have any questions that came into the chat, if people want to go ahead and place their questions, if you're on Instagram, place it in your chat area. If you're on YouTube, the comment box, we would love to take those questions from you. We think that they're the most important here for the show. After all, we're here for you. But we have one that came in from a viewer that I wonder if you can stick around to help me answer. Before we take any from the audience, this person writes in, "Dear Talk Doctor, I am a 23-year-old Black male who came from a family with our share of struggles and family trauma, from poverty to dysfunction, substance abuse. I was molested as a child by my older brother, and I've had to live with the memories of the sexual trauma. I'm now a father raising my own child along with my girlfriend, and I have difficulty coping with life. I suffer from depression and anxiety. I worry that my mental health issues will prevent me from showing up for my daughter because I have trouble showing up even for work. At times, I feel as if I'm losing my mind. The only thing that seems to make sense in my life is my daughter. She makes me happy. I want to be able to stay in her life. What can I do to deal with life?"
I think that's your question, Doctor. I mean, that's clearly a clinical, I think, type of question that deserves a clinical response from, again, the judicial, spiritual perspective. You have to seek out help, whether it's spiritual help and counseling, therapeutic counseling, professional counseling, so that you can deal with those issues. You want to be the best possible father you can be to your child without letting your past impact her future.
Yes.
And so it's really, really important that you deal with those issues. It's wonderful that you have acknowledged those issues already in your comment. And so you're ahead of the game because you recognize your own issues, you know what needs to be addressed, and you just have to do the work.
Absolutely.
But at the time. And as you grow in that and you learn how to overcome those issues, help someone else along the way. Someone else's life as well. There's so many people who have dealt with the same exact circumstances that you dealt with as a child, unfortunately. And there's always someone else that you can help. I always say, even if you're in the hospital, there's someone in the bed next to you that you can encourage, that you can say a word to. And so no matter what you're going through, you can always help someone else while you're in the midst of your difficulty.
Absolutely. I like that response. I do. And, as I think about this from a clinical stance, and as we're talking about the Black family unit, I think that it's critical, like you said, that he does get professional help, because what's going to happen if he can't show up for his daughter anymore? One of the the stigmas within Black families is you often see them with single parents or being raised by grandparents or other family members because the nuclear family has dismantled for whatever reason. And with this young man talking about his mental health issues, he can easily run away. He can easily slip into the background or slip into other issues because he's not addressing his mental health concerns. But the idea that he has made up in his mind that he wants to be in this family, he wants to be here for his daughter, and that he is acknowledging, like you said, the number of things that have occurred in his life that's causing him to feel depressed and anxious. He's ahead of the game because self-awareness is key. But he has to take it to the next level. You talked earlier about not being afraid to seek help. And a lot of times among minorities and Blacks, it's often this sense of stigma. And if it's not the stigma, well, I don't want to seek help from somebody who doesn't look like me. They won't understand my experience. And these have been some of the struggles with reaching out for help, or that I reach out for help and I'm further traumatized because somebody doesn't understand the struggles, the unique struggles and experiences that I have had to go through. But I will definitely say that yours are deep issues that cannot be ignored and that cannot be just simply helped by informal systems. Informal systems are great. So your friends, your relatives, your families, groups that you might join in your community. But these are real clinical issues that do need to be addressed by a licensed professional, because he talked about the struggles within his family, the substance abuse, the addiction, the molestation that still needs to be unpacked. And what he's seeing now in his life is what's masking all of that. The depression and the anxiety is a symptom of something greater. So he definitely needs to make sure that he finds a licensed professional that he can connect with and connect with on a long-term basis. And if there are struggles within his own nuclear family now, that he needs to make sure that his whole family is supported as well. Because where he gets the individual support, he can also help to support the rest of his family by connecting them with supports, because a lot of struggles that people have individually trickles over to everybody else in their family just based on how they show up. And so I do agree with you, seeking the help, is going to be necessary. And at the end, we're going to put up some supports on the screen so people can see where to seek help. But, kudos to you for writing in this question and talking about the things you've gone through. If you want to show up in the life of your daughter and be there for her for the long haul, you've got to put on your oxygen mask first. You got to really get some help and stay with it. Be consistent. Get through the hard times. That's the only way that you're going to get through this, is by really unpacking a lot of the pain you've had to deal with in your past. So I hope this helps you. Do we see anything in the chat? Any comments? Any questions? Doesn't look like anybody has, wrote in any questions for us today. So we got off scot-free. I hope this helped. I hope this resonated. I want to thank you, Judge Fentress, for being here today. Your presence, your expertise, your guidance on, what you're seeing and where the Black family goes from here has been just incredible. And I just want to thank you for your time and attention to this subject matter today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed speaking with you and speaking with your listeners. Just pray that everyone does well and continues to do well throughout this pandemic. And don't forget to ask for help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. All right. So we're going to go ahead and do a wrap up. You still have time if you need to, just share your thoughts, your questions, your comments, anything that might be something that you want to explore here today. We want to be able to be helpful. We want to be able to be helpful to you. So please go ahead and put your questions or comments in the chat for us. I just want to pull up on my screen the information that I shared, that I said we would be sharing here today. One of the things as I wrap up, I want to share with you this quote: behind every strong person is a story that gave them no choice. Here at Power Talks with the Talk Doctor, featuring Ask the Talk Doctor Live, we believe that all families matter because they are the foundation and the strength of helping children thrive. When a family unit breaks down, the individuals within that family will suffer and will struggle. And when this happens, it becomes like a running vine sweeping through communities, reaching across imaginary and real boundary lines. And then the struggles of those individuals within Black families will ultimately affect the whole, no matter who you are, no matter where you live. So this quote, "Behind every strong person is a story that gave them no choice." I want to say that there are many strengths that lies within the Black community. Rising out of painful, oppressed, and dire situations are CEOs, entrepreneurs, athletes, powerful pastors and ministers, movie stars, and the list goes on. I too can attest to the fact that I had hardworking parents. And though things were not always perfect and we didn't have much, my mother could rub 2 pennies together to make $1. My father could make just about anything with his own hands. Therein lied the strength. We may not have had much, but they made sure that we didn't know it. And I think I turned out pretty darn well. There are many Black families doing just this, tapping into their inner strengths. But we live in a different society today. And post-pandemic, it seems that it's harder to tap into those strengths and those supports that we were very well able to do in past times. Scriptural teachings say, "How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity." Psalm 133:1. I love that so much because I want to say that we need to get back to community, showing kindness, compassion for others, even when we don't understand their situation. It seems to me that we've moved away from the expectations that we are responsible for each other. And we're embracing this me first culture, failing to recognize that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, where each one teaches the other, where each one helps each other, whether help comes from the informal systems and the village, what it still looks like out there for each other. We need to get back to that kind of community. We need to get back to a time when everybody knew each other, when everybody looked out for each other, when communities offered a place for kids to play safely, where churches were filled with worshipers because it was what kept the family unit strong and together, where school systems focused on learning needs and not on political agendas or self-serving principles and ideals. We need to get back to those times. Supports are available, and if you're thinking about where you can find help, as my guest indicated today, which she sees in her courtroom all the time, where the aunts, the uncles, the elders come and show up for children that need help. Pastors, clergies, places of worship, you can find help. You can also find help from community leaders and organized, concerned citizens. And not to forget that no matter what your race, no matter what your ethnicity, no matter what your color, there's always a licensed professional that can help you process some of the issues you may be dealing with that might cause you to go out and act out. So on your screen, you'll find some places nationally where you can find support, some of which I'll mention here. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is always a great one. Jack and Jill of America, the Black Alliance on Mental Health, the National Alliance on Mental Health, the NAACP Defense Fund, the list goes on. I think we need to find strength once again in asking for help, because that's the first step in recognizing how much you can really do with the supports around you and the supports that are really in your community. So I want to thank you guys so much for being here today to help me unpack the state of the Black family post-pandemic. If you liked our broadcast today, please don't forget to leave us a comment, hit that like and subscribe button before you leave, and we will very much appreciate it. We thank you so much for the community of those who show up week after week to support this broadcast. Remember, we're unpacking your questions, so send them in to askthetalkdrlive@gmail.com. Tell a friend, tell two, a colleague, a cousin, an uncle, whoever you want to tell. And I will see you next time on Power Talks with the Talk Doctor, featuring Ask the Talk Doctor Live. Thank you guys so much for being here.